The bullet shattered the window of the general store 3 inches from Lily Preston's head, sending glass cascading across the flour sacks like deadly rain, and she knew without question that the ghosts of her father's sins had finally caught up with her. She dropped to the wooden floor, her basket of supplies tumbling and scattering beans across the planks. The proprietor, Mr. Hendricks, had already disappeared behind his counter with the practiced speed of a man who had survived the rough mining camps of Idaho Territory since 1879. It was now the summer of 1884, and Ruby City had supposedly grown civilized, but Lily knew better. Civilization was a thin veneer that cracked the moment someone decided your blood owed a debt. "Lily Preston!" The voice boomed from outside, rough as gravel scraping iron. "We know you're in there, girl. Your father stole from the Garrett gang, and now it's time to pay what's owed. Come out peaceful, and maybe we'll make it quick." Her heart hammered against her ribs. Thomas Preston had been dead for 3 months, hanged in a dusty Nevada town for crimes she had never fully understood. He had been a gambler, a con man, a person who moved through life like smoke, impossible to grasp, and just as likely to choke you. When news of his death reached her in the boarding house where she worked in Silver City, she had felt nothing but a hollow relief. She thought the chapter of her life connected to him had closed forever. She had been wrong. "I don't have whatever he stole," she called back, her voice steadier than she felt. She was 21 years old, and she had spent the last 5 years trying to build a life separate from her father's shadow. She worked honest jobs, kept her head down, and tried to forget that Preston blood ran in her veins. "He never gave me anything!" Laughter erupted from multiple throats outside. At least 3 men, maybe more. The Garrett gang had a reputation that stretched from Colorado to California, a collection of outlaws who ruled through fear and violence. If they believed her father had stolen from them, they would not stop until they had extracted their pound of flesh. Another shot rang out, this time taking out the remaining glass in the window. "You got 1 minute to come out, or we start burning buildings until someone drags you out." Mr. Hendricks looked at her with frightened eyes. "Miss Preston, I got a family upstairs. Please, I cannot have trouble here." Shame burned through her fear. Innocent people should not suffer because of her father's mistakes. She started to rise, already calculating how much it would hurt when they killed her, when the back door of the shop exploded inward. A man filled the doorway, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a dusty brown hat pulled low over his eyes. He moved with the fluid grace of someone completely comfortable with violence, a rifle in his hands and a pair of revolvers strapped to his hips. His jaw was shadowed with several days of stubble, and his eyes, when they found hers, were the color of storm clouds over the mountains. "Stay down," he said, his voice a low rumble that somehow cut through her panic. Then he was moving past her, positioning himself at the shattered window with the ease of a man who had done this 100 times before. "Who the hell are you?" she whispered. "Someone who doesn't think daughters should hang for their father's sins," he replied without looking at her. "Name's Marcus Brennan. Now stay quiet." The outlaws outside had heard the commotion. "Someone else in there? That your sweetheart, Lily Preston? Well, he can die too if he wants to play hero." Marcus did not respond with words. Instead, he fired 3 shots in rapid succession, each one deliberate and precise. Lily heard a scream, then cursing, then the thunder of horses retreating at speed. She waited, every muscle tensed, but no return fire came. Marcus stayed at the window for a long moment, rifle steady, before he finally lowered it. "They'll be back," he said. "But not today. I winged one and scattered them enough that they'll need to regroup." "Why did you help me?" Lily asked, finally pulling herself to her feet. Her legs felt like water, but she forced them to hold her weight. "You don't know me." He turned then, and she got her first clear look at his face. He was perhaps 25 or 26, with strong features and eyes that had seen too much for someone so young. A scar ran along his left cheekbone, pale against his sun-bronzed skin. "I know the Garrett gang," he said, "and I know they don't care much about justice, just about making examples. Been tracking them for the better part of a month now. You a lawman? Something dark flickered across his expression. Not exactly. Let's just say they killed someone I cared about, and I aim to return the favor. But I draw the line at murdering innocent women for their father's crimes. Mr. Hendricks had emerged from behind his counter, still pale but regaining his composure. Marcus Brennan, he said, recognition dawning. You're the bounty hunter out of Montana. Heard you cleaned up that gang terrorizing the mining camps near Helena last year. Marcus shrugged. That was a different life. Right now, I'm just a man with a grudge and a decent aim. He looked back at Lily. You got somewhere safe to go? She shook her head. I've been working at the boarding house, but if the Garrett gang knows I'm in Ruby City, nowhere here is safe. They have eyes everywhere. Then you need to leave town. Tonight, if possible. And go where? The hopelessness in her own voice made her angry. She had worked so hard to build even this small, precarious life. The boarding house job had given her a room and meals. She had started to make friends, to imagine a future that did not involve running. I have no money, no family, nowhere to run to. Marcus studied her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. I have a camp about 10 miles north, up in the mountains where the old mining claims are. It's defensible, hidden. You can stay there while I figure out how to deal with the Garrett gang. Why would you do that for a stranger? Because your father isn't you, he said simply. And because if I don't, they'll kill you for something you had no part in. That doesn't sit right with me. The words landed in her chest like a physical blow. For 5 years, she had carried the weight of her father's reputation, had seen the suspicion in people's eyes when they learned her name, had been turned away from jobs and rooms because Preston meant trouble. No one had ever drawn that line before, had ever separated her from her father's sins. I'll pay you back, she said. Somehow. I'll work, I'll do whatever you need, but I'll pay you back for this. Let's worry about keeping you alive first, Marcus said. Go get whatever belongings you have. We leave in an hour, as soon as it's full dark. The ride through the Idaho mountains under a sliver of moon was both terrifying and oddly peaceful. Lily sat behind Marcus on his horse, a sturdy roan gelding with a calm temperament, her small bag of possessions tied to the saddle. She had never been this close to a man before, and she was acutely aware of the solid warmth of his back, the way his body moved with the horse's gait. He did not speak much as they rode, his attention focused on the trail and the shadows around them. Lily understood. The Garrett gang might have retreated, but they would not give up. Men like that lived by reputation, and letting a debt go unpaid would be seen as weakness. They climbed higher into the mountains, following paths that barely deserved the name. Pine trees rose around them like dark sentinels, and the air grew cooler and sharper. Lily had spent most of her life in mining towns and rough settlements, but she had never ventured this deep into true wilderness. Finally, after what felt like hours, Marcus guided the horse off the trail entirely, picking his way between trees and over rocky ground until they emerged into a small clearing. A crude cabin stood against the mountainside, barely more than 4 walls and a roof, but it looked solid. A creek bubbled nearby, the sound of water over stones a soothing constant. Built it myself last month, Marcus said as he dismounted and then helped her down. His hands on her waist were gentle but impersonal. Not much, but it's shelter, and nobody knows it's here. Inside, the cabin was sparse but functional. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, a bedroll lay in one corner, and supplies were stacked neatly along another wall. Marcus lit an oil lamp, casting warm light across the rough interior. You take the bedroll, he said. I'll sleep outside. Keep watch. You don't have to do that. I can take a turn at watch. He looked at her with something that might have been respect. You know how to shoot? My father taught me, she admitted. About the only useful thing he ever did. Marcus nodded slowly. Then tomorrow we'll see what you remember. But tonight you need rest. You look about ready to collapse. She wanted to argue, but exhaustion was dragging at her bones. The adrenaline that had kept her moving had faded, leaving only bone-deep weariness. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything. I know you didn't have to help me." "Get some sleep, Lily," he said, and there was an unexpected gentleness in his rough voice. "Tomorrow we start figuring out how to end this." She woke to sunlight streaming through the cabin's single window and the smell of coffee. For a moment she could not remember where she was, and then everything came crashing back. The attack, the escape, Marcus Brennan. She sat up quickly, pushing her dark hair out of her face. Through the open door, she could see Marcus tending a small fire outside, a pot of coffee suspended over the flames. He had removed his hat, and his hair was dark brown, slightly too long, curling at his collar. Lily stood and smoothed her dress, suddenly self-conscious. She had slept in her clothes, and she probably looked as disheveled as she felt. But there was a creek nearby, and at least she could wash her face. When she stepped outside, Marcus looked up and nodded a greeting. "Coffee's hot. There's some jerky and hardtack if you're hungry. Not fancy, but it fills the belly." "It's more than enough," she said, accepting the tin cup he poured for her. The coffee was strong and bitter, but it chased away the last cobwebs of sleep. "Have you seen any sign of them?" "Not yet, but they'll be looking. The Garrett gang doesn't give up easy." He paused, studying her over his own cup. "Tell me about what your father stole. Everything you know." Lily sat down on a log near the fire, cradling the warm cup in her hands. "Honestly, I don't know much. My father and I were never close. After my mother died when I was 15, he left me with a family in Silver City and disappeared for months at a time. He'd show up occasionally, always with money, but never with explanations. Last time I saw him was 2 years ago. He was drunk, rambling about a big score, something that would set him up for life." "He never mentioned the Garrett gang specifically?" "No, but he mentioned a poker game in Sacramento. Said he'd finally beaten some men who thought they owned the world. I assumed he was just boasting. My father loved to make himself sound more important than he was." The old bitterness crept into her voice. "Then 3 months ago, I got word he'd been hanged in Nevada. The marshal who sent the telegram said he'd been caught cheating at cards, but there were other charges too. Theft, fraud. I didn't ask for details. I just wanted it to be over." Marcus was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "The Garrett gang runs high-stakes poker games as a front for their other business. Smuggling, robbery, intimidation. If your father cheated them and won, he would have walked away with a lot of money. More importantly, he would have embarrassed them, made them look like fools. And now they want blood," Lily finished, "even though he's already dead. Men like Silas Garrett, they think in terms of messages. Letting your father's daughter walk free sends the wrong message. They need to make an example." The casual brutality of it made Lily's stomach turn. "So what do we do? I can't run forever." "No," Marcus agreed. "You can't. Which means we need to change the terms of the game." He stood, walking to the edge of the clearing where he could see down the mountain. "I've been tracking the Garrett gang for 5 weeks now. My sister, Emma, she worked in a saloon in Boise. Silas Garrett took a liking to her, but she wasn't interested. So he decided to take what she wouldn't give. When my brother-in-law tried to defend her, Garrett shot him dead. Emma died 3 days later from her injuries." The pain in his voice was raw, barely contained. Lily stood and moved closer to him, though she did not touch him. "I'm so sorry. I was working a claim up in Montana when it happened. By the time I got word and made it to Boise, they were both buried and the Garrett gang had moved on. The local law wouldn't touch them. Said there wasn't enough evidence, but I knew the truth. They were scared." He turned to look at her, and the grief in his eyes took her breath away. "I've been following them ever since, waiting for the right moment. But they always have too many men, too many guns. I needed an advantage. And now you have me," Lily said slowly, understanding dawning. "Bait, not bait." Marcus said firmly. A partner, if you're willing. What are you proposing? The Garrett gang will keep coming after you, but if we're smart, we can control when and where they find you. Set a trap. I know these mountains, no places where numbers won't help them. We draw them in, even the odds, and we end this. It was dangerous, possibly suicidal, but Lily found herself nodding anyway. They're going to kill me either way, at least this way I'm choosing the fight. Something like approval flickered in Marcus's eyes. Then we start training. If you're going to survive this, you need to remember everything your father taught you about shooting and then learn a whole lot more. Over the next several days, Lily discovered that Marcus Brennan was a patient but demanding teacher. He started by assessing her skills with a pistol, and while she could hit a target more often than not, her form was sloppy, and her reaction time was slow. You're thinking too much, he said on the third day, standing behind her as she aimed at a line of cans he had set up on a fallen log. By the time you've thought about the shot, you should have already taken it. That's easy for you to say, she replied, frustrated. She had missed the last 4 shots, and her hand was starting to shake from the weight of the revolver. Marcus moved closer, his presence warm at her back. Here, he said, reaching around to adjust her grip. His hands covered hers, strong and calloused, guiding her into the proper position. Feel that? You're holding it too tight. The gun should be an extension of your hand, not something you're wrestling with. Lily's heart was pounding, but not from fear. She was intensely aware of how close he stood, the scent of leather and pine that clung to him, the solid strength of his body. Like this, she managed to ask. Exactly like that. Now breathe. In and out. On the exhale, squeeze the trigger. She followed his instructions, feeling the rhythm of her own breath, the steadiness of his hands over hers. On the exhale, she squeezed, and the gun fired. The leftmost can exploded off the log. There, Marcus said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. That's how it's supposed to feel. He stepped back, and Lily immediately felt the absence of his warmth. She fired again, then again, and 3 more cans went flying. When she finally lowered the gun, she was grinning despite herself. Better, Marcus said. Much better. Keep practicing. But weapons training was not all they did. Marcus taught her how to move quietly through the forest, how to read tracks and signs, how to build a fire that would not give away their position. He showed her which plants were edible and which would kill her, how to find water, how to navigate by the stars. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, and slowly, carefully, they began to share pieces of their lives. Lily told him about her childhood, about a mother who had loved her fiercely but died too young, about a father who had been more absence than presence. She talked about the boarding house in Silver City, about the small joys she had found in honest work and simple friendships. Marcus spoke less, but what he shared mattered. He had grown up on a ranch in Montana, the oldest of 3 siblings. His father had died when he was 16, and he had taken over the responsibility of caring for his mother and younger sisters. Emma had been the baby, bright and funny and full of life. When she died, something in Marcus had broken. I should have been there, he said one night, staring into the flames. I was chasing dreams of striking it rich, leaving her to fend for herself. You couldn't have known, Lily said gently. And even if you had been there, the Garrett gang might have killed you too. Maybe, or maybe I could have stopped it. He looked at her then, the firelight casting shadows across his face. That's the thought that keeps me awake at night. All the maybes. Without thinking, Lily reached out and placed her hand over his. Your sister wouldn't want you to destroy yourself with guilt. His hand turned under hers, his fingers threading through hers. No, he agreed quietly. She'd tell me I was being a fool. She always was smarter than me. They sat like that for a long time, hands joined, neither speaking. It was the most peaceful moment Lily had experienced since the attack in Ruby City, and she found herself wishing it could last forever. But peace was a luxury they could not afford. On the eighth day, Marcus returned from a scouting trip with news. "Found their camp," he said, his expression grim. "About 15 miles south, near the old Springer mine. 6 men, including Silas Garrett himself. 6 against 2, Lily said. Not great odds. No, but the terrain there is in our favor. Lots of places to take cover, narrow approaches. If we're smart, we can whittle them down before they ever see us coming." He paused. "But Lily, I need you to understand. This is going to be dangerous. If you want to run instead, I'll help you get to Oregon or California, somewhere far enough that they might never find you." She had thought about this over the past week, had lain awake in the cabin at night considering her options. But the truth was she was tired of running. Her whole life had been defined by her father's choices, his mistakes, his sins. This was her chance to take control of her own story. "I'm not running," she said. "We end this." Marcus studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Then we leave tomorrow at dawn. I'll need today to prepare." That evening, as the sun set in a blaze of orange and gold, Lily found Marcus sitting on a boulder overlooking the valley below. She climbed up beside him, and for a while they just watched the light fade from the sky. "Are you scared?" she asked finally. "Terrified," he admitted, "but not for myself. For you." His honesty surprised her. She turned to look at him and found him already watching her. "Why me? You barely know me." "I know enough," Marcus said. "I know you're brave and smart and stronger than you give yourself credit for. I know that when I look at you, I see someone worth fighting for, worth protecting." He reached up, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch gentle. "And I know that somewhere along the way, I started caring about you a whole lot more than I probably should." Lily's breath caught. She had felt it too, the slow build of something between them, but she had been afraid to name it. "Marcus." "You don't have to say anything," he interrupted. "I just needed you to know, in case tomorrow goes wrong." "Tomorrow won't go wrong," she said fiercely, "because we're both going to survive, and when we do, I'm going to tell you that I care about you too, that you're the first person in my entire life who has ever made me feel like I matter, like I'm not just my father's daughter, but my own person." She took his face in her hands, feeling the rough stubble beneath her palms. "So we don't talk about it going wrong. We talk about what comes after." Then she kissed him, pouring all her fear and hope and desperate longing into the press of her lips against his. For a moment, Marcus seemed frozen, and then he was kissing her back, his arms coming around her, pulling her close. It was nothing like she had imagined her first kiss would be. It was raw and honest and filled with the urgency of two people who knew how fragile life was. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Marcus rested his forehead against hers. "After," he said, his voice rough. "We'll talk about after." They set out before dawn, moving through the pre-dawn darkness with practiced silence. Marcus had spent the previous evening going over the plan again and again until Lily could recite it in her sleep. They would approach the Garrett gang's camp from the high ground, using the rocky terrain to stay hidden. Marcus would take the first shots, drawing the outlaws' attention and hopefully dropping at least one or two before they could organize a response. Lily would provide cover fire from a different position, forcing the gang to split their attention. It relied on surprise, on accuracy, and on a fair amount of luck. But it was the best plan they had. The old Springer mine came into view as the sun crested the mountains, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. Below, in a clearing near the abandoned mine entrance, Lily could see the gang's camp. 6 horses were tethered to a line, and smoke rose from a campfire. Men were moving around, preparing for the day. Marcus touched her shoulder and pointed to a cluster of boulders about 50 yards to the east. That was her position. She nodded and began to carefully pick her way across the rocky slope, every sense alert for loose stones or anything that might give away her presence. It took nearly 20 minutes to reach the boulders, and by then the sun was fully up. Lily positioned herself behind the largest rock, her rifle resting on the smooth stone surface, aimed down at the camp. From here, she had a clear view of 4 of the 6 men. Marcus would be directly across from her, higher up the slope, with a view of the entire camp. She waited, her heart pounding so loud she was sure the outlaws below must be able to hear it. Then, like thunder breaking the stillness, Marcus's rifle spoke. One of the outlaws, a tall man with a red bandana, dropped instantly, a crimson stain spreading across his chest. The camp exploded into chaos. Men dove for cover, reaching for weapons, shouting questions and curses. Lily forced herself to breathe, to remember Marcus's training. She found her target, a heavy-set man scrambling toward the horses, and squeezed the trigger. The recoil kicked against her shoulder, and the man stumbled and fell. Gunfire erupted from below, bullets striking the rocks around her position, sending stone chips flying. Lily ducked, her pulse racing, then popped up and fired again. Another man down. 3 left, including Silas Garrett. "There's 2 of them," someone shouted, "up in the rocks." The remaining outlaws began to lay down suppressing fire, making it impossible for Lily or Marcus to aim properly. She caught a glimpse of movement on Marcus's side of the slope and realized with horror that one of the outlaws was attempting to flank his position. "Marcus!" she screamed, but her voice was lost in the thunder of gunfire. She did not think, just acted. Leaving the cover of her boulders, she ran across the slope, firing as she moved. Her third shot caught the flanking outlaw in the leg, and he went down with a scream. But her movement had exposed her, and suddenly bullets were buzzing around her like angry hornets. Something punched her left arm, spinning her around. She stumbled, nearly fell, but caught herself against a tree. Blood was streaming down her sleeve, but the arm still worked, and that was all that mattered. Marcus had seen her danger. He emerged from his cover, rifle blazing, and the outlaw who had been shooting at Lily collapsed. That left 2. Silas Garrett and 1 other man had taken cover behind their horses. The horses were screaming, terrified by the gunfire, and Lily felt a stab of sympathy for the animals caught in human violence. "Enough!" Garrett's voice boomed across the clearing. "Marcus Brennan, I know it's you, and I know you got the Preston girl with you. Let's talk about this like reasonable people." Marcus did not respond, but Lily saw him repositioning, trying to get a clear shot. "Your sister squealed real pretty before she died, Brennan," Garrett shouted, his voice mocking. "Just like a stuck pig. Maybe I'll make the Preston girl squeal too. Let you listen before I put a bullet in your head." Rage, white-hot and overwhelming, surged through Lily. She stepped out from behind her tree, rifle raised, and fired. The shot went wide, striking the horse's saddle instead of Garrett, but it was enough to make him flinch, to shift his position. And that was all Marcus needed. His shot was perfect, catching Garrett high in the chest. The outlaw leader staggered back, surprise etched on his features, and then collapsed into the dirt. The last man, seeing his leader fall, threw down his weapon and raised his hands. "I'm done," he shouted. "Don't shoot! I'm done!" The sudden silence was deafening. Lily stood there, rifle still raised, blood dripping from her wounded arm, hardly able to believe it was over. Then Marcus was beside her, his hands on her shoulders, his face tight with concern. "You're hit," he said, already examining her arm. "That was stupid what you did. Brave, but stupid." "He was going to kill you," she said, and her voice sounded distant to her own ears. "I couldn't let that happen." "The bullet went through," Marcus said, his hands gentle as he probed the wound. "Clean. You'll need stitches, but you'll be fine." He looked up at her, and his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "You scared the hell out of me." "We're alive," she said, and then she started to laugh, a slightly hysterical sound. "We're actually alive." Marcus pulled her into his arms, careful of her injury, and held her tight. She could feel his heart pounding against her chest, could feel the tremor in his hands. They stood like that for a long moment, just breathing, just being alive together. Finally, Marcus pulled back. "Stay here," he said. "I need to make sure they're all dead and secure that last one." Lily sank down onto a rock, suddenly exhausted. She watched as Marcus moved through the camp with methodical efficiency, checking bodies, collecting weapons. The surviving outlaw, a young man who could not have been more than 20, sat with his hands on his head, looking terrified. "What's your name?" Marcus asked him. Billy Turner. I just signed on with them 2 weeks ago, mister. I didn't know about the girl or your sister or nothing. I just needed work." Marcus studied him for a long moment. "You're going to ride to the nearest marshal's office, and you're going to tell them exactly what happened here. That Silas Garrett and his gang were killed while resisting capture for their crimes. You understand?" "Yes, sir. I'll tell them exactly that. And Billy, if I ever hear of you riding with outlaws again, I'll track you down myself. You want to work. There are plenty of honest jobs out there." "Yes, sir. I swear I'm done with this life." Marcus gave him his horse and some supplies and sent him on his way. Then he returned to Lily and gently helped her to her feet. "Let's get back to the cabin. I need to tend to that arm properly." The ride back was slow and painful. Lily's arm throbbed with every movement, and exhaustion dragged at her bones. But Marcus kept her talking, asking her questions, making sure she stayed alert and awake. At the cabin, he cleaned and stitched the wound with surprising skill. "Learned field medicine during my time working cattle drives," he explained as he worked. "Cowboys are always getting hurt, and there's not always a doctor nearby." "It hurts," she admitted through gritted teeth. "I know. You're doing great. Almost done." When he finally tied off the last stitch and bandaged the wound, Lily felt like she had been put through a ringer. Marcus made her drink some water and eat some jerky, then settled her onto the bedroll with a blanket. "Rest," he ordered. "I'll keep watch." But Lily caught his hand before he could leave. "Stay," she said, "and please, I don't want to be alone." Marcus hesitated, then nodded. He lay down beside her, careful not to jostle her injured arm, and she curled against his side, her head on his shoulder. His arm came around her, holding her close, and for the first time since this nightmare began, Lily felt truly safe. "It's really over," she whispered. "It's over," Marcus confirmed. "Silas Garrett is dead. His gang is broken. No one's going to come after you for your father's sins anymore. So what happens now?" She felt him press a kiss to the top of her head. "Now we figure out what our after looks like." Lily recovered quickly over the next week. The wound on her arm was healing clean, and her strength returned with rest and regular meals. Marcus had ridden down to Ruby City to speak with the marshal, confirming that the Garrett gang had been dealt with and that Lily Preston was no longer in danger. The marshal, a practical man named Dutch Harrison, had taken statements and officially closed the case. Word spread quickly through Ruby City and the surrounding towns. Lily Preston, the daughter of a con man, and Marcus Brennan, the bounty hunter with a vendetta, had taken down one of the most feared gangs in the Idaho Territory. But Lily found she did not care much about the reputation or the story people were telling. What mattered was sitting across from Marcus by the fire each evening, talking about everything and nothing, learning the shape of his smiles and the sound of his laughter. "I'm thinking of heading back to Montana," Marcus said one evening, about 2 weeks after the confrontation. "My mother's still there, running the ranch. She could use help, and I'm tired of the bounty hunting life. I want something more settled." Lily's heart sank. Of course he would want to return to his home, to his family. Why would he stay in Idaho for her? "That sounds like a good plan," she said, trying to keep her voice neutral. Marcus looked at her across the fire, his expression unreadable in the flickering light. "I was hoping you might come with me." She stared at him. "What? Come with me to Montana? Meet my mother? See the ranch? It's beautiful country, and there's plenty of room. You could build a life there. A real life, not just running from your father's shadow." He paused, then added quietly, "With me, if you want that." Marcus, are you asking me to marry you? Eventually, if you'll have me, but I'm not rushing you. I just know that these past few weeks with you have been the happiest I've been since Emma died. You make me want to build something again instead of just tearing things down for revenge. You make me want a future. Tears pricked at Lily's eyes. I've never had a home, she said softly. Not a real one. Just temporary places, always waiting for the next disaster. But with you, even in this rough cabin in the middle of nowhere, I felt more at home than I ever have. Then come home with me, Marcus said, standing and moving around the fire to kneel in front of her. He took her hands in his. Let me give you the life you deserve. Let me love you the way you should be loved. Yes, Lily said, the word barely more than a whisper. Yes, I'll come with you. I'll build a life with you. Marcus pulled her into his arms, and she went willingly, wrapping herself around him. When he kissed her, it was different from that first desperate kiss before the battle. This was soft and slow and full of promise, a kiss that spoke of forever. They left for Montana 3 days later, after Lily had collected her few possessions from the boarding house and said her goodbyes to the people she had known in Ruby City. Marcus had purchased a second horse for her, a gentle mare named Daisy, and they rode north together as summer ripened into early autumn. The journey took over a week, following trails through mountains and across valleys painted in shades of green and gold. They camped under the stars each night, and Marcus taught Lily the constellations, pointing out the patterns ancient travelers had used to navigate. She told him stories her mother had told her as a child, folk tales and fairy stories that made him smile. They talked about their plans for the future. The ranch had cattle and horses, and Marcus wanted to expand the horse breeding operation. Lily, who had learned bookkeeping during her time at the boarding house, offered to help manage the financial side of things. They discussed where they would live at first, whether they would build a new house or expand the existing ranch house, what it would be like to have children someday. It felt surreal to Lily, planning a future like this. For so long she had lived day by day, never daring to look too far ahead. But with Marcus, she could imagine years stretching out before them, full of work and laughter and love. They crossed into Montana territory on a cool morning with mist rising from the valleys. Marcus pointed to a range of mountains in the distance. "That's home," he said, and his voice was thick with emotion. "Just beyond those peaks." By late afternoon, they rode through a gate with a weathered sign that read Brennan Ranch. The property was vast, rolling grassland, dotted with cattle and framed by forested hills. A sturdy log house sat near a creek, with a barn and several outbuildings nearby. As they approached, a woman emerged from the house. She was perhaps 50, with silver streaking her dark hair and Marcus's same gray eyes. When she recognized her son, her face lit up with joy. "Marcus!" She ran toward them, and Marcus dismounted quickly, catching her in a fierce embrace. "Thank God, I was so worried. You've been gone for months." "I'm sorry, Ma, I had something I needed to do." He pulled back and turned to help Lily dismount. "But I brought someone home with me. This is Lily Preston. Lily, this is my mother, Catherine Brennan." Catherine's shrewd eyes assessed Lily for a long moment, taking in everything from her travel-worn dress to the healing wound on her arm to the way she stood close to Marcus. Then her expression softened into a warm smile. "Lily Preston, my son has been writing to me about you, though his letters were frustratingly short on details. Welcome to Brennan Ranch, dear." "Thank you, Mrs. Brennan," Lily said, feeling suddenly nervous. "I hope my presence isn't an imposition." "Nonsense! Any friend of Marcus's is welcome here." Catherine linked her arm through Lily's. "Come inside, both of you. You look exhausted, and I imagine you have quite a story to tell." Over dinner, the full story came out. Marcus explained about tracking the Garrett gang, about finding Lily under attack in Ruby City, about their weeks in the mountain cabin, and the final confrontation. Catherine listened with a mixture of horror and pride, her hand occasionally reaching out to touch her son's arm, as if reassuring herself he was really there and unharmed. When the story was finished, Catherine turned to Lily. "You're a brave young woman," she said simply, "and I can see why my son cares for you so deeply." Lily felt herself blushing. "He saved my life, multiple times." "And you saved his," Catherine countered. "Both his life and his soul, I think. When he left here, he was so full of rage and grief over Emma's death. But looking at him now, I see my son again, not just a man bent on revenge." She reached across the table and took Lily's hand. "So thank you, dear, for bringing him back to me." That night, Catherine showed Lily to a small but comfortable guest room. "I know you and Marcus have been through a lot together," she said with a knowing look. "But under my roof, we maintain proprieties. At least until there's a wedding. Mrs. Brennan, we haven't, that is. Marcus hasn't officially." "Oh, he will," Catherine said with confidence. "Probably within the week. If I know my son. He's never been one to waste time once he's made up his mind about something." She patted Lily's cheek gently. "Get some rest, dear. Tomorrow I'll show you around the ranch properly." As Catherine had predicted, Marcus proposed officially 3 days later. He took Lily on a ride to a high meadow overlooking the ranch, where wildflowers bloomed in riotous color and the mountains rose like sentinels in the distance. "This was Emma's favorite spot," he said as they stood together, the wind tugging at their clothes. "She used to come up here when she needed to think. I wanted to bring you here because I think she would have liked you. She always said I needed someone who would challenge me, who wouldn't let me get away with my stubborn nonsense." "I definitely challenge you," Lily agreed with a small smile. Marcus turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "Lily Preston, I'm not good at fancy words or pretty speeches, but I know that from the moment I saw you in that general store, something shifted in me. You were terrified but defiant, and I knew I couldn't walk away. These past months with you have shown me what I want my life to be. I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to build this ranch with you, raise children with you, grow old with you. So I'm asking, will you marry me? Will you be my wife and my partner in everything?" Lily felt tears streaming down her face, but they were tears of joy. "Yes," she said, laughing through the tears. "Yes, Marcus, I'll marry you. I love you so much." He kissed her there in the meadow, with the mountains as witnesses and the wind singing around them. Then he pulled back just far enough to reach into his pocket and produce a simple gold band with a small blue stone set in it. "It was my grandmother's," he explained as he slipped it onto her finger. "Ma gave it to me this morning. Said she knew I'd be proposing soon." The ring fit perfectly, and Lily stared at it, this tangible symbol of a future she had never dared to dream of. "It's beautiful," she whispered. They were married 6 weeks later, in early October of 1884, in the small church in the town of Havenbrook, Montana. Catherine had spent the intervening weeks in a flurry of preparation, sewing Lily a wedding dress of cream-colored silk with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. The whole community turned out for the wedding, curious to meet the woman who had captured Marcus Brennan's heart and helped him take down the notorious Garrett gang. Lily walked down the aisle with Catherine at her side, since she had no father to give her away, and she found she did not mind. Catherine had become the mother she had lost, welcoming Lily into the family with open arms and open heart. Marcus waited at the altar in his best suit, his hair freshly cut, his eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. When she reached him, he took her hand and held it like he would never let go. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. They exchanged vows, promising to love and honor each other through all the challenges life might bring. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Marcus kissed her with such tenderness that several people in the congregation sighed audibly. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and food enough to feed an army. There was music and dancing, and Marcus surprised Lily by being a decent dancer, spinning her around the makeshift dance floor with confidence. "Where did you learn to dance?" she asked, laughing. "My mother insisted all her children learn the basics," he admitted. Said it was part of being civilized. Emma was the real dancer in the family, though. She could dance all night and never get tired. Lily heard the sadness in his voice and squeezed his hand. Tell me about her, she said. Tell me a happy memory. So as they danced, Marcus told her about the time Emma had convinced him to sneak into town for a dance when they were teenagers, and how they had nearly been caught by their mother. He told her about Emma's infectious laugh, her terrible singing voice that she insisted on inflicting on everyone, her fierce loyalty to her family. She would have loved you, Marcus said finally, and I think she would be happy knowing that I found someone who makes me want to live again, not just survive. I hope I can honor her memory, Lily said softly, by loving you well and building the life she'll never get to have. As the sun set on their wedding day, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, Marcus led Lily away from the celebration to the house they would share. Catherine had moved into one of the smaller outbuildings, insisting the newlyweds needed their privacy, and had furnished the main house with loving care. In the bedroom, Marcus was gentle and patient, showing Lily the physical expression of the love they had already built. There was tenderness and passion, discovery and joy. Afterwards, they lay tangled together, her head on his chest, his fingers tracing idle patterns on her back. No regrets? He asked softly. Not a single one, Lily replied. You? Only that I didn't find you sooner. The years that followed were rich with hard work and deep satisfaction. Lily took over managing the ranch's finances and proved to have a talent for it, finding ways to maximize their profits and invest wisely. Marcus expanded the horse breeding operation, developing a reputation for training quality animals that were sought after throughout Montana Territory. They worked side by side every day, whether they were mending fences, breaking horses, or managing the books. They learned each other's rhythms and moods, developing the kind of partnership that made them stronger together than they ever could have been apart. Catherine remained a constant presence, a source of wisdom and support. She taught Lily how to preserve food for the winter, how to manage a large household, and how to navigate the social complexities of ranch life. She also shared stories of Marcus's childhood, giving Lily insight into the man she had married. In the spring of 1886, Lily discovered she was pregnant. She told Marcus one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, and his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He swept her into his arms, careful not to squeeze too tight, and pressed kisses to her face while whispering his joy and love. We're going to be parents, he kept saying, wonder in his voice. We're actually going to be parents. Are you ready for this? Lily asked, her own excitement tinged with nervousness. With you, I'm ready for anything. Their son was born in early December, a healthy baby with a shock of dark hair and his father's gray eyes. They named him Thomas Marcus Brennan. Marcus had been surprised by the choice of first name, looking at Lily with question in his eyes. He was a terrible father, Lily explained, holding their son close. But he gave me life, and that life led me to you. I want to take that name and give it new meaning, new hope. I want our son to redefine what Preston and Brennan mean. Marcus kissed her forehead, his eyes bright with unshed tears. You're an amazing woman, Lily Brennan. Catherine was a doting grandmother, helping with the baby and giving the new parents both guidance and space to figure out parenthood on their own. Thomas was an easy baby, content to sleep in a basket while his parents worked and watch the world with solemn curiosity when awake. 2 years later, they welcomed a daughter, whom they named Emma Catherine. She had her mother's dark hair and her grandmother's blue eyes, and from the moment she was born, she was fierce and opinionated. Marcus doted on her shamelessly, and Lily often found him in the nursery, just watching his daughter sleep with an expression of awestruck wonder. As the children grew, Lily and Marcus made sure to teach them about their heritage honestly. They told them about Thomas Preston's mistakes and failures, but also about how Lily had refused to be defined by her father's sins. They told them about Emma Brennan, the aunt they would never meet, and how her death had led to justice, and eventually to a family being built from tragedy. The children grew up surrounded by love and the rugged beauty of Montana. Thomas showed an early aptitude for working with horses, following his father around the ranch and absorbing everything Marcus taught him. Emma was more interested in books and numbers, often helping her mother with the ranch accounts and showing a sharp mind for business. In 1892, Catherine Brennan passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 62. The entire family mourned her loss, but they took comfort in knowing she had lived to see her son happy, to know her grandchildren, and to witness the ranch thriving. Lily and Marcus planted a garden in her memory, filling it with all the flowers Catherine had loved. They would often find the children there, talking to their grandmother's memory, sharing their triumphs and troubles as if she could still hear them. The ranch continued to prosper through the 1890s. Montana achieved statehood in 1889, and with it came new opportunities and challenges. The open range era was ending, replaced by more structured land ownership and regulations. But the Brennan Ranch adapted, securing their land claims and continuing to build their reputation for quality horses. Marcus and Lily remained deeply in love throughout it all. They had their disagreements, of course, moments of frustration when the work was hard and money was tight. But they had learned in those early desperate days how to fight together rather than against each other, how to communicate and compromise. On their 10th anniversary, Marcus took Lily back to the meadow where he had proposed. The children were old enough to stay with a neighbor for the night, and they rode up alone, carrying a blanket and a basket of food. 10 years, Marcus said, as they sat together watching the sunset. Sometimes it feels like yesterday we were running from the Garrett gang, and sometimes it feels like we've always been together. I've been happy, Lily said simply, happier than I ever thought possible when I was that terrified girl in the general store. You were never just a terrified girl, Marcus corrected gently. You were brave from the start. You just needed someone to show you that your father's sins weren't yours to carry. Lily leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of his body, the steady beat of his heart. You gave me more than freedom from my father's past. You gave me a future, a family, a place where I belong. We gave that to each other, Marcus said. I was so lost in revenge and grief before I met you. You brought me back to life. They made love under the stars that night, their passion tempered and deepened by a decade of partnership and love. Afterwards, wrapped in the blanket with the Montana sky vast above them, Lily felt a peace so complete it brought tears to her eyes. "What are you thinking?" Marcus asked, noticing her emotion. "That I wish I could go back and tell that scared 21-year-old girl that everything would be okay, that the outlaws hunting her for her father's sins would lead her to the greatest love of her life, that she would find a home and a family and more happiness than she could imagine. She probably wouldn't have believed you," Marcus said with a soft laugh. "No," Lily agreed. "She wouldn't have. But that's okay. She had to live it to understand it." As the years continued to pass, the Brennan Ranch became known throughout Montana as a place of integrity and quality. Thomas grew into a fine young man, skilled with horses, and eventually taking over much of the day-to-day ranch operations. Emma went to Teachers College in Helena and returned to start a school in Havenbrook, educating the children of ranchers and miners alike. Marcus's hair went gray at the temples, and lines formed around his eyes from years of squinting into the Montana sun. Lily's hands grew rough from ranch work, and she found silver strands in her dark hair. But when they looked at each other, they still saw the young people who had found each other in the midst of violence and fear and chosen to build something beautiful together. In 1904, Thomas married a rancher's daughter named Sarah, and in 1905 they gave Lily and Marcus their first grandchild, a girl named Catherine after her great-grandmother. Holding the baby, Lily felt the circle complete. From her father's sins to this perfect innocent life, the journey had been long and often difficult, but it had been worth every step. Marcus stood beside her, his arm around her shoulders, looking down at their granddaughter with wonder. "We made this," he said softly. "Not just her, but all of it. The ranch, the family, the life." "We did," Lily agreed. and it's better than anything I could have dreamed. Emma married a few years later to a lawyer from Helena, and they had two sons who were as rambunctious and full of life as their mother had been as a child. The ranch house was often filled with the sound of children playing, with laughter and occasional tears, with the messy, beautiful reality of a large family. On quiet evenings, when the grandchildren had gone home and the work was done, Lily and Marcus would sit on the porch together, watching the sun set over the mountains. They did not need to talk much anymore. After so many years together, they could communicate with a glance, a touch, a comfortable silence. But sometimes Marcus would take her hand and say, "I love you, Lily Brennan." And she would always reply, "I love you too, Marcus. Thank you for seeing me, for seeing that my father wasn't me. Best decision I ever made," he would say. "Stepping into that general store, choosing to fight for you. Best decision I ever made was trusting you," she would counter. "Coming with you into the mountains, building this life with you." In the spring of 1918, as World War I raged in distant Europe and the world seemed to be tearing itself apart, Marcus Brennan passed away in his sleep at the age of 60. He had lived a full life, had seen his children grown and his grandchildren thriving. His last words to Lily, spoken the evening before as they sat on the porch, had been, "Thank you for every day. I'd do it all again in a heartbeat." Lily mourned him deeply, feeling like half of herself had been torn away. But she did not fall apart. She had learned strength from necessity all those years ago, and she drew on it now. She continued to help run the ranch with Thomas, to spend time with her grandchildren, to live the life she and Marcus had built together. She planted a garden next to Catherine's, filling it with all of Marcus's favorite wildflowers. She would sit there on sunny days, talking to him the way the children had once talked to Catherine, sharing the news of the family and the ranch. Emma and Thomas were endlessly supportive, making sure their mother was never alone unless she wanted to be, including her in every family gathering and decision. But they also understood when she needed solitude, when she needed to grieve in her own way. One day, about a year after Marcus's death, Thomas found his mother in Catherine's garden, tears streaming down her face. He sat down beside her, not speaking, just offering his presence. "I was just thinking," Lily said finally, "about the day your father asked me to marry him, right up there in that meadow. I was so scared of being happy, of believing I deserved something good. But he was so certain, so sure that we belonged together." "He was right," Thomas said gently. "You two had something special. Everyone could see it." "I'm not crying because I'm sad," Lily clarified, wiping her eyes. "Well, I am sad. I miss him every moment, but I'm also crying because I'm grateful. 34 years of marriage to the best man I've ever known, children and grandchildren who fill my life with joy, a home that's truly mine. I was being hunted by outlaws for my father's sins, and then your father said, 'Your father isn't you.' Those words changed my entire life." Thomas hugged his mother, this strong woman who had survived so much and built so much. "He'd be proud of you, Ma. Proud of how you're carrying on, how you're still living fully." "I learned that from him," Lily said. "How to keep living even after loss. He taught me so many things." Lily lived another 9 years, dying peacefully in 1927 at the age of 64. She passed away in the house she and Marcus had shared, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, having lived to see the world change in ways she could never have imagined as a young woman in the 1880s. At her funeral, Emma stood to speak. "My mother's life was defined by courage," she said, her voice clear and strong. The courage to refuse to be limited by her father's mistakes, the courage to trust a stranger who offered help, the courage to fight for her life and her future, the courage to love deeply and build a family. She and my father showed all of us what true partnership looks like, what it means to face life's challenges together. Their love story began with violence and fear, but they transformed it into something beautiful and lasting. We are all here because they chose each other, because they chose love over fear. And that's the greatest legacy they could have left us. Lily was buried next to Marcus in the small cemetery in Havenbrook, their graves marked by simple headstones that read Marcus Brennan, 1858, 1918, beloved husband and father, and Lily Preston Brennan, 1863, 1927, beloved wife and mother. Between them, carved into both stones, were the words, Together in life, together in eternity. The Brennan Ranch continued to thrive under Thomas's management and eventually passed to his children. But the story of Marcus and Lily, the cowboy and the woman hunted for her father's sins, became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. It was a story about how the worst circumstances could lead to the greatest blessings, about how love could be found in the most unlikely places, about how the sins of the past did not have to define the future, about how one person's belief in you, one person's willingness to say your father isn't you, could change the entire trajectory of a life. Years later, long after both Marcus and Lily were gone, their great-great-grandchildren would still visit those graves, would still tend the gardens planted in memory, would still tell the story of how their family began. And they would understand, in the way that only family stories can teach, that we are not bound by the sins of those who came before us, that we have the power to write our own stories, to create our own legacies. That love, real love, sees us for who we truly are, not who our fathers were or what shadows we were born into. It sees potential and chooses courage and builds futures out of ashes. That was Marcus and Lily's gift to the generations that followed. Not just the ranch or the land or the material success, but the knowledge that redemption was always possible, that love could heal the deepest wounds, and that family was something you built day by day, choice by choice, with the person who chose to stand beside you no matter what ghosts were hunting you. Their story had started with a bullet through a window and a cowboy who said the words she needed to hear. It had continued through danger and discovery, through building and growing, through raising children and weathering storms. And it had ended, decades later, with two people who had loved each other completely, who had built a life of meaning and purpose, who had proven that your beginning did not have to determine your end. In the quiet of the cemetery, with Montana wind singing through the grass and mountains standing eternal watch, their graves rested side by side. Together in life, together in eternity, just as it should be. Just as they had chosen that day in Ruby City when everything began. The outlaws had been hunting her for her father's sins. The cowboy had said, "Your father isn't you." And everything that came after, all the love and life and legacy, had flowed from that simple truth spoken at exactly the right moment by exactly the right person. It was a story worth remembering, a love worth celebrating, a life worth living. And so the Brennan family carried on, generation after generation, built on the foundation of courage and love that Marcus and Lily had laid. The ranch stood as a testament to what two people could build when they believed in each other. The gardens bloomed year after year, tended by hands that knew the story of how they came to be. And the mountains, ancient and enduring, watched over it all, as they had watched over a young woman running for her life and a young man who chose to save her. Some love stories begin with flowers and courtship and gentle romance. This one began with gunfire and desperation and a stranger's kindness, but it ended with everything that matters. A life well lived, a family well loved, a legacy well earned. Marcus and Lily Brennan had taken their broken beginnings and forged them into something whole and beautiful. They had transformed fear into love, danger into safety, isolation into family. They had proven that redemption was always possible, that the past did not have to dictate the future, that love was the most powerful force in the world. Their story was complete, every thread woven together, every promise fulfilled. From that terrified moment in the general store to the peaceful passings decades later, they had lived fully and loved deeply. They had faced every challenge together and emerged stronger for it. They had built not just a ranch, but a legacy, not just a family, but a testament to the transformative power of love and courage. And in the end, that was everything. That was the whole story, from beginning to end, complete and fulfilled. A love story for the ages, set in the Wild West, but timeless in its truths. A reminder that we are always more than our father's sins, always capable of writing our own stories, always able to find love in the most unexpected places if we have the courage to reach for it. The Brennan family knew this truth in their bones, and they would carry it forward generation after generation, keeping the memory alive of the cowboy who saved the woman being hunted, and how that single act of defiant kindness changed everything for all the generations that followed.